Orange County voters sent some strong messages in the recent primaries. They recalled a state senator who voted for the gas tax increase and decided they'd like to see good old-fashioned Democrat versus Republican battles for Congress this November. What does it all mean in Orange County and beyond? Well, here to discuss, campaign consultant John Thomas and political scientist Michael Moodian. They're next on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
All your life, people talk about what's best for you. But to most people, it's just that. Talk. Unless you're with Memorial Care, a healthcare system devoted to one important thing: what's best for you.
It's a long way from now until November,
really is,
so
yeah,
we'll see.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff, and I'm here with John Thomas and Michael Moodian. Gentlemen, always great to have you on.
Great to be here.
So, Mike, this Josh Newman recall, I think, was maybe the most significant development in the primary in Orange County. Josh Newman, a newly elected state senator, somewhat of a surprise, a Democrat who got in on the Hillary Clinton coattails, if you will, from the presidential election, voted for the gas tax. The Republicans targeted him, basically made no qualms about the fact he was the weak link. He was the the one that they could go after. Is he a canary in the mine shaft as far as what might be developing in November?
It's a good question, Rick. And by the way, Rick, congratulations, my friend, on your Lifetime Achievement Award from the OC Press Club. So very well deserved.
You live long. Well, thank you, Miss. Some people have suggested this is what happens when you live long enough. But anyways,
well deserved.
Yeah, and it's a great honor. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think this was a significant loss for Democrats in Orange County. Statewide, the Democrats put a lot of resources and a lot of funding into fighting the Newman recall, and they lost. They lost badly. You know, the recall passed
almost 60-40.
Right. The recall passed by a very wide margin. So this means the Democrats will no longer have a supermajority. This is politics, and when these types of things happen, wouldn't surprise me if this means that now the Democrats are going to have to maybe work with some Republicans on their pet projects to get a few Republican votes on their side. But this was, in my opinion, the most significant Democratic loss, perhaps statewide, because there were a lot of efforts on both sides for the Republicans, of course, were for the recall. The Democrats, of course, were opposed to the recall. Like you said, Newman was vulnerable. He barely won when he won a couple of years back, and the Republicans, led by Carl DeMaio, saw this as an opportunity, and it worked very well for them.
And there are a couple big takeaways for me about this recall, and it's not just about Josh Newman. It's about the issue that the recall was about. Gas tax. And people were wondering, is the gas tax going to be a wedge issue as we go into the fall? And it was all about the gas tax. And not only did it crush the Democrat on that issue, but it drove up turnout. If you look at that 39th congressional district it overlaid, turnout, it's a Republican +2 registration district. Turnout was over 10 points advantage Republican, which is bigger than what we would expect in a midterm. And some are saying it's because of two wedge issues, one being the gas tax and second being sanctuary cities. And this plays to a larger play. The GOP in California is saying, look, if we're going to turn out our base, we've got to run on fiscal issues and issues of immigration to make sure our people vote.
Okay, let's stick with the gas tax for a moment. Do you think that how far could this take the Republicans? I mean, there's been some talk this could help John Cox, and I still think most people would think the idea that a Republican would win the governorship of California in this day and age is just too far out there. Could it have other benefits? Might it save some congressional seats? Could it flip a couple of state seats? Where do you think this opposition to the gas tax, could play out.
It's really all about the House. I know we'll get into that in a second, but it could likely save a couple of these House seats. John Cox just being on the ballot, having a Republican on the ballot, likely save some of these House seats. We're modeling internally a 3-point turnout shift.
So you're saying in the top two, had you wound up with Gavin Newsom
Correct.
and another Democrat.
We were modeling a depression of 3 points because a lot of Republicans would say, well, I don't want to choose the lesser of two evils here. So they just simply wouldn't vote. So Cox did the Republicans a big favor just by getting there. But now you add on top of the gas tax, you're going to turn out a lot of those no party preference voters who were formerly Republicans that are fiscal conservatives. May not like Trump, but they certainly don't want their taxes raised.
Yeah, Mike, what's your analysis?
Our research is consistent with John's research. It was a big deal that the Republicans were able to land a candidate in the top two for governor. I think that would have been a disaster had we had a runoff with Newsom and Villaraigosa. So yes, the gas tax is something that affects everybody. People don't like it. People don't like the prices that they pay at the pump. Separate from the reasons that we have the gas tax. So I think that this November we're going to see the Republicans use the gas tax, sanctuary cities as a wedge issue, and on the Democratic side, it all depends on the popularity of the president. We'll see. 6 months is a long time from now.
How do you see the sanctuary cities issue? The gas tax is kind of, I get the sense Democrats have to duck when the incoming.
It's hard to argue for tax increases. Yeah,
but when it comes to the sanctuary cities, I see Gavin Newsom and Democrats in general saying, "Okay, you want to argue that? We'll go to the mat on sanctuary cities and being against Donald Trump in November, and that will play more to our benefit than our loss."
Yeah, and the sanctuary city issue, from the research that we've done, it's still a hot button issue, of course, with the conservative base in Orange County, but we're showing that the county is really evolving. And this isn't the county of 1994 or the county of the 1980s, driven in large part by the Latino electorate, the Asian American electorate, and the youth. We're seeing a county that's starting to look a lot more like the country as opposed to being a strictly conservative enclave in Southern California. So it's a hot button issue. I think that Republicans will use it to their advantage, particularly in Republican favored districts, but it's also going to draw some opposition too, depending on the district.
And the issue of sanctuary cities all depends on how it's framed. If it's framed as a public safety issue, in our testing we've done in Orange County, it's a winner, not just off the charts with Republican, and generates that intensity that we're looking for. Remember, when Republicans control all branches of government, essentially at the federal level, we run the risk of Republicans going, well, why do I need to turn out? Right? So it reminds people to turn out. There is a reason. The other issue we found sanctuary cities are a winner is with that ever-growing no-party preference voter category, it's almost a 60-40 issue if it's framed as a public safety issue. And the other issue about sanctuary cities, which really is wonderful for Republicans, is never underestimate the ability of national Democrats to overplay their hand on issues of immigration. For instance, Gavin Newsom knows he's got this governor's race in the bag. He might use this as a wedge issue to position for president, to overplay his hand advocating for illegals rather than a public safety issue. So you could see this issue where Gavin doesn't care so much what happens in Orange County as he wants to be a darling of the left for national politics.
Mike, how should the Democrats be positioning this issue?
I'll tell you, especially in Orange County, you have roughly a third of the county being composed of residents who were born outside of the United States. We have a very large immigrant population in Orange County. In my view, Dana Rohrabacher taking a stance against sanctuary cities, that'll probably help him in his district where he has a double-digit advantage. But if I'm the Democrats, I embrace multiculturalism and I continue to be the party that is the party that's welcoming to individuals of all backgrounds.
Okay.
That's how
and
I would.
Since you mentioned Dana, let's talk. But just before we get to Dana, we will now get into the House races, including Dana Rohrabacher. Four in particular, where there had been some concerns that there wouldn't even be a Democrat in the top two, and the Democratic National Party put a lot of money into it, and we are, by golly, going to have those good old-fashioned Republican versus Democrat showdowns in November. So let's first look at the 39th district. One that, sadly for you, John, you have some familiarity with because you were running the campaign for Sean Nelson, the supervisor who was who is not one of the winners in this, but 39th District, North Orange County mostly, and a young Kim, a Republican, as we see right now, 25% of the vote roughly, and Gil Cisneros with 18%. They're the top two because there were a ton of people running. And these are, I should stress, all of these numbers we're going to look at are not the total tabulation. They're unofficial. They're still, I think, close to 20% of the ballots to count. But given the trends, this is most likely what we're going to see. So anyway, your thoughts, John, first of all, since you were on the ground in this race, does this give us any hint of what's going to happen in November?
First of all, you got to give kudos to the Democrats on a national level. They played their hands smartly, especially in the 39th. They spent millions to bury the Republicans and ensure that it was a Republican and a Democrat. So good for them. They have somebody at the table.
And who were the people they weren't burying young Kim,
No,
right?
they left her completely alone.
And
they buried my client Sean Nelson with almost $2 million in negative spend, and Senator Bob Huff, they also buried him. And they basically figured that the votes would scatter or go to the Republican, the other main Republican who's not getting attacked, and that in fact worked. What's interesting is Gil Cisneros is a guy who literally won the lottery. I mean, he won the megapot. I think it was over $200 million, and then decided a couple years later, hey, I like the idea of running for Congress. So he did. He made it through, although it wasn't a guarantee that he was going to make it through. Besides the two Republican issue, there were multiple self-funders in this race. I mean, it was an expensive battle. Gil ended up spending almost $5 million. I guess easy come, easy go, right? But he went up on broadcast TV with an extra $1 million in the last week. That saved this race. Yeah. The challenge Gil Cisneros is going to have is much, I think, with the same challenge of Antonio Villaraigosa had in the primary. And that's Gil is going to be banking on Latinos breaking his way. But what we're seeing is this midterm cycle is pretty much looking in California like every other boring midterm cycle in terms of turnout. So Gil is going to have to build a bigger tent. And the problem when you haven't been a local elected or you have no track record to point to is it's going to be a casting stones against Donald Trump. The trouble is, we are modeling in this district in the primary, Trump was at about 49% approve, and that's not a terrible place to be, Rick.
You know, I would add to that it was a big loss for the Democrats when Newman got recalled, but to me it's a victory for the Democrats because they avoided near disaster because districts such as the 39th and in the 48th, it was a possibility that there would be two Republicans who would advance to the general. It looks like we're going to have a Democrat advance to the general in these four races because right now it's a two-way race more or less with Baugh about 1.2, 1.3% behind the two front runners in the 48th. So you know, if there are any races in which the Democrats have a shot at flipping, to me, the 39th and the 49th.
The big takeaway on these congressional races, though, is there is no path for the Democrats to take back control of Congress without coming right through Orange County. They have to flip a couple of these seats. So they dodged a major bullet by staying in the game.
Which again is a reminder to viewers of why we're talking so much about these races and why they're important, because if, as what you're saying is true, if the Democrats want to recapture the House, they have to do it in California. Then that means probably they have to do two, let's say, one or two in Orange County. And you know, imagine if the House flipped. The consequences of that for the nation, whether you like it or don't like it, would be profound.
Impeachment hearings would begin on day one. I mean, whether or not there was grounds for impeachment, that's exactly, they would halt Trump's agenda, which is smart politics for them, and they would start impeachment hearings. I mean, that's what they would do.
And I see you nodding, Mike, so you agree that the stakes are huge here.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And
So
we're going to see the National Party get involved this summer, both sides, both the Republican and Democratic side.
Yeah, I think I hear what you say, John, about Gil Cisneros, but I've kind of been impressed with his story. Just an average, you know, blue-collar guy who grew up in that area, and as you say, won the lottery. And what did he do with his lottery money? He didn't, like, move to Aruba or something, you know. He's been putting it into parks and schools, and I think he's building up, kind of some grassroots support. So I think this will be a fast. And if you look, one of the things I like to look at is, what's a total Republican vote versus Democrat vote, and it's like 50-50.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
It's although in campaigns we typically don't like first-time candidates to run at that level of a federal race, because you don't know what you don't know, because they're not battle tested, Rick. They haven't been through a tough assembly race. They haven't been a county supervisor, and they're prone to mistakes. The candidate, even if you have seasoned consultants guiding them, they can still make mistakes.
Okay, let's move on now to another one, and I think you just mentioned that, Michael, the 49th, another toss-up, really. And this, in the 49th, we're looking at it here again. These are not complete results, but Diane Harkey with roughly 25%, and Mike Levin 17. Tell us quickly, Mike, who's Diane Harkey, who's Mike Levin, and what do you make of this?
Sure.
This race?
Harkey is a longtime elected official, member of the Board of Equalization. I would argue California doesn't need a Board of Equalization because our franchise tax board can handle that, but that's another episode. Former state assembly member. And Mike Levin is a longtime friend of mine. He's an environmental attorney. He's been working in government relations. He's been involved in politics at the local level for more than a decade now. And the 49th is...
We should mention this is
right.
Darrell Issa's seat.
This is
He's
Darrell
decided
Issa's
not
seat.
to run. Yeah.
And it's a multifaceted district, because you have the coastal elites of South Orange County all the way down to Del Mar. You have working class Republicans, working class Democrats. You have a strong Marine Corps community with Oceanside and Camp Pendleton. So it's in my view the most multifaceted of these districts in Orange County. And San Diego voters in a district that is mainly in San Diego are going to have two Orange County candidates to choose from in this
John,
district.
what do you make between Mike Levin's, Michael Moodian's buddy Mike Levin and Diane Harkey? Any hints here? Because again, this looks like one where actually the Democrat vote was a little heavier than the Republican vote. Is this a toss-up?
I think it leans slightly to the right, but there are a lot of unknowns. First of all, the Dem that got through, and a lot of these Orange County races, a lot of these guys self-funded to the tune. I think he spent almost, what, $4.5 million or something?
And Sarah Jacobs spent a lot of money,
it's incredible. You can't underscore
I don't
how
think
much
Mike Levin will need to self-fund in the general, do you?
Probably not. The Democrats will bail him out with whatever he needs, but depending on how Trump's approvals are as we go into November, a trick we always use on the consulting side is trying to localize these races. Right. Try to talk about local accomplishments and local things you've done. Diane Harkey having a record being a local elected official could in fact save her. On the other side, she has some real baggage, Rick, and she's never been through a cycle where she's truly been tested. So we'll see. If anybody is to predict what's going to happen in these races now, they're fools, because it's a long way to November.
Great, and I should circle back just briefly. The 39th district is Ed Royce's seat, longtime powerful member of Congress who is stepping down, and young Kim is an experienced politician.
She was an assemblywoman and Ed Royce's field deputy for 20 years.
Okay, let's move on to the one that I think most folks would agree has been the most fun to watch. And that's in the 48th district, Huntington Beach and surroundings. Dana Rohrabacher, the longtime councilman, ran around with the Taliban many years ago when the Taliban were good guys and all that, and of course quite a character, and you either love him or hate him. And in this race, as we look at it, we can see that Dana easily won. He'll be advancing, but only a third of the vote. And you've got two Democrats here whose total together adds up to more. We don't know which one of them is going to get through right now. You've got Hans Kierstead, a biomedical entrepreneur, Harley Ruda, a lawyer businessman, and they're just neck and neck right now. And then Scott Baugh, who is the other Republican, looks like he might be out of it at this point. So what do you make of this race, Mike?
Wow, this is one that the Democrats almost shot themselves in the foot over, because this district has a double-digit Republican advantage, and there were several Democrats running, and they almost canceled each other out. I think that this will be a tough one for the Democrats to win because of the Republican registration advantage. Then again, Rohrabacher's saying, you know, he's a person of controversy, and Baugh highlighted a lot of those things in his campaign. Just recently, the Real Estate Association pulled their endorsement of him because of some reprehensible comments that he made about selling homes to the LGBTQ community. So it's a long time from now. It's hard to say. Frankly, if I were the Democrat running against Rohrabacher, I'd want him to get media time, and let's see what else he says when he opens his mouth.
Yeah, John, I have saved all of the mailers I've gotten. I live in that district, and I just want people, you know, these are, and believe me, these are mostly negative. There's lots of pictures of, you know, Rohrabacher with Putin and Scott Baugh with Nancy Pelosi, and it goes on and on and on. Will I be getting even more in the mail in the general?
But it's going to be worse. You're not going to be able to look at your phone. You're not going to be able to turn on your television or your radio. It's going to be all-consuming. You know, Scott Baugh, I think, really was tilling the soil for 2020. He's waiting till Dana retires, and he becomes the heir apparent. There are two things that I'm looking at in this race. First, the fact that Hans Kierstead, despite being outspent by almost $2.5 million by Harley Ruda, the other Democrat, is still in the lead now, really is a flaw in campaign strategy on the Harley Ruda campaign. They gave Hans a 3-week jump start of early communication, so Hans did great with the early vote. And in the end, the Democrats were panicking, saying Hans is a flawed candidate. We've got to have Harley Ruda. So the DCCC, the Democratic arm, came in with Harley and went up on broadcast TV for an extra $1 million+ for the last week. And so you saw, although Harley came in a 3rd or 4th place on election night, as the night ticked on, Harley did better and better as election day votes resulted. So my prediction is Harley does overtake Hans. But here's the other thing. Harley can beat Dana Rohrabacher, with one exception. If Dana runs a smart campaign, and that's a big if, because he hasn't had to run a smart campaign in a long time. Incumbents get fat and happy, and we're going to talk about that later, I'm sure. But I think if the campaign consultants, and I'm not working with Dana, but if the campaign consultants frame, instead of reinventing Dana as somebody he's not, if they embrace his quirkiness and they say, yeah, he's quirky because he doesn't answer to party bosses, he does what he thinks is best for us, I think people will buy that frame. But if he tries to do the standard Beltway messaging of saying that these are all false attacks, I don't know what you're talking about, Dana's a completely rational and steady incumbent, that may be exploited.
Okay, we're running low on time, so let's move on, and we're just going to quickly look at the 42nd. This one is starting to look kind of safe now for Mimi Walters. Did I have it right, 42nd or 45th?
45th.
45th,
Yeah.
All right, I misspoke. So it's the 45th. Mimi Walters will be up against Katie Porter, a UCI law professor, and that one is starting to look safe, right? So we can move on. So let's talk, Mike, I want to get your views as well as John's, another race you're involved in very closely. Todd Spitzer versus Tony Rackauckas for DA. We've talked about it before. It doesn't look like anything was really resolved in the primary. These guys are neck and neck.
Right. I was very surprised, though, by how close Todd came in terms of voter percentage to Tony Rackauckas. That's a message. He's got a good campaign strategist in John Thomas, but you know, I mean, less than 4 points. That surprised me. When I was here a month ago, Rick, I think backstage we were talking about Tony just winning, the possibility of Tony winning 51%. That is positive momentum for Spitzer. I'm not a Spitzer or Rackauckas fan, but that was a good showing for Spitzer in my opinion.
And Mike's not wrong. I mean, in a low information contest like these DA's races, the power of incumbency, that district attorney ballot title, should pop you through. I mean, think about Don Barnes, who ran for sheriff. He just had the word undersheriff, and he could win this thing outright, possibly. So the fact that way we're looking at it in Team Spitzer, is every election in this kind of environment is a referendum against the incumbent. This is the same incumbent, Tony Crocus, who typically got over 60% of the vote, Rick.
So as we're almost down on time, and just quickly, Mike, Brett Murdoch is this third candidate.
Correct.
He's the Democrat. The other two guys are Republicans.
Right.
Where is his vote going to go?
That's the question. The 22% that Murdoch received, are those votes that are, anti-Tony and Todd votes, that are the person going
5
against them,
seconds.
or are they strictly the anti-Tony votes? If that's the case, Todd will get many of those votes.
Alrighty, very good. So that'll be interesting to see how that breaks down. Gentlemen, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Just an hour ago, I got some bad news. LT has passed away of cancer, age 70. Larry Thomas, for many years, was the spokesman for the Irvine Company and one of the most trusted advisors to its boss, Donald Bren. Before that, he had been the press guy for Vice President George H.W. Bush, San Diego Mayor and future Governor Pete Wilson, and for Governor George Deukmejian. A gaunt LT was at the Duke's funeral just a few days ago, reminders of our mortality. As the voice of the powerful, LT would sometimes tangle with journalists, but because of his integrity, brilliance, and good cheer, he turned most of us into friends, a very good friend in my case. I'll remember his support, encouragement, good advice, but even more the buddy times on a golf course, at a ball game, or over a glass of wine, good wine, with Larry. LT loved politics, California, Orange County. He loved life. St. Peter has himself a new spokesman. And that's it for now. Thanks again to my guests, John Thomas and Michael Moodian. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows on our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.